Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com.
Welcome to Compass Points, a podcast about Knoxville and Knox County government, politics, business, education, and just about anything else that grabs our attention. I am Scott Barker, the editor of Compass, and Compass is a subscription-based website newsletter where we report on all those topics and more, and you can find us at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, Compass co-founder, Jesse Mayshard. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. It's been, I know we're going to talk about a lot of stuff here locally, but locally, statewide, regionally, nationally, globally, I feel like there is a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of it not great, or at least concerning in various ways. Just a lot to keep track of. I feel like I'm approaching, I know a lot of people feel this way these days, and I feel like I'm kind of approaching overload and kind of need to unplug, but we do this, right? It's hard, but there's just a lot going on. I do want to give a shout out, however, point of personal privilege. My youngest son, Rex, is graduating from high school this Saturday. I guess it will have already happened by the time this comes out, but congratulations, Rex. He's a super smart kid who has at times struggled with the concept of the homework being mandatory rather than something he can do if he feels like it. There were a couple of classes he had this year where we were like, is he going to get through? But he's through, and so congratulations, Rex.
Congratulations. Yes, absolutely. And congratulations to you for getting through.
Kids get to this age, they're kind of like, I'm there to kind of help however I can. But he's 18 years old. He is responsible for his own actions, as I keep telling him. Well,
speaking of someone with responsibilities, also here today, as always, is Lord Seth Barber, the intrepid producer at Barbarian Productions. Seth, give us the 3-day-old weather report, and then talk about whatever else you want to talk about.
It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous Friday here in the west side of town. A little bit of Christmas to the air, which I'm a big fan of. A little bit of crisp. I'm holding on. Maybe our last.
Oh, crispness! Yes. I thought you said Christmas. I was like, not yet.
Christmas in July.
Let's not rush it.
No, just that just tiny, cool mornings. It's still got the cool mornings holding on, and those are my favorite. But here in another week or so, it's going to be just hot all the time. So,
interesting point about that. I was mentioning that to a friend last week. Like, this weather is so nice. It's cool in the morning. It gets medium warm in the afternoon, sort of unusually cool. And he said, well, this used to just be May. And we increasingly come to think of, May being defined by 80 plus degree weather, because that's become more the norm. But it is true that like this did just kind of used to be mid-May.
Yeah. And last year, for example, it got really hot, if I recall.
Yeah,
mid-May. So I do like this, and the kind of little bit cool air, and especially in the mornings.
Can open the windows at night when you're sleeping.
Yeah, it's all good. So, well, as you mentioned, Jesse, a lot went on this week, and we're only going to scratch the surface in this week's podcast. Knoxville City Council passed a ban on, or gave initial approval, it's only on first reading, of an ordinance that would ban smoking in the handful of bars that restrict entry to those who are 21 and older. Then also we'll talk about the continuing fallout from the Shelby County redistricting, which we alluded to a moment ago, things statewide that are where there are things going on. Also, the Knox County Schools has banned the book Roots, and we'll talk about that for a bit. County Mayor Glenn Jacobs introduced his budget for next year and his last budget as mayor since he's term limited, and we'll talk about that. But we'll start out talking about the kind of the blockbuster news of the week, and that was the indictments of former Sheriff J.J. Jones and 10 other people with either work for the sheriff's office now, are former employees, or one who's just got a connection with the sheriff's office and isn't an employee. But they were all indicted for basically stealing drug money. So it was the grand jury passed down indictments on Wednesday. On Thursday, they began those who were indicted began turning themselves in. Jones, who hasn't been in all. I mean, it's been 8 years since he was sheriff. This investigation started basically the malfeasance that they are looking at goes back to 2011. So it's really, a historic thing, but it also apparently lasted up till just about now. But the others who were indicted, one of them could have been the next sheriff. It was.
I mean, we dodged a big bullet here. But two of the guys indicted were on the ballot just last.
Yeah,
year.
I mean, you got to give a bit of credit to voters in the county Republican primary because of 4 candidates for sheriff they had to choose from. They picked one of the 2 who was not going to be indicted the next week.
Yeah, the other one, of course, was David Amburn, who was the assistant chief deputy at the sheriff's office, and who was endorsed by Spangler, Sheriff Spangler. But they were the 2 headliners who were indicted, but there were 9 others who were indicted as well. And all of them, except for the one civilian, were at some level connected with the narcotics unit. And what they are accused of doing is using the narcotics unit's credit card, and then just taking cash. The credit card purchases were the big expenses. Then cash was less, but still nonetheless only $30,000 or so. So still nothing to sneeze at. The credit card purchases were $300,000, so they estimate. But all of the people charged were charged with conspiracy, and then two different theft violations. So they were arrested, or they surrendered, booked, processed. They're all of them have bonds of $100,000. So now they had to go, because this was the sheriff's office. The District Attorney General Sharm Allen recused herself from this. They brought in the executive director of the District Attorneys General Conference, Stephen Crump, to kind of be the special prosecutor, and he brought in assistants as well. And so they did they actually prosecuted the case, or are going to be prosecuting the case. But this case actually started as a federal investigation, and that federal investigation has already resulted in the conviction. He pleaded guilty of David Henderson, who was the narcotics unit head under Jones. He was arrested last year, pleaded guilty. Now, the interesting thing here is he appears to have been a source of information for the prosecutors, because his plea agreement from his federal case required him to cooperate, and they do all kinds of things. His pre-sentencing, they do an investigation pre-sentencing. It was filed under seal, and his when he was convicted, he could have served up to been sentenced to up to 3 years in prison, or 5 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of up to $250,000. And that was what he was facing. He has not been sentenced yet, but there is a sentencing memorandum that the parties have agreed to, where he will basically serve a year of supervised release and make restitution, and that's about it. And his actual, and one interesting bit of timing, we talked about timing of the indictments right after the primary election, on Thursday morning, just as all of the accused were reporting to jail for booking, Judge Varlin in federal court, Tom Varlin, moved his sentencing date to the fall, to October. It was going to be next week. So, but now Henderson also was one of the ones who was charged this week.
He's got some new charges.
He's got new charges to deal with, and that's the federal charge he pleaded guilty to was defrauding a federal program, because the drug unit uses federal funds, or receives federal funds for some of their operations. And these are state charges of theft. So there's a little, they're different charges, essentially same set of facts. I mean, what the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, who did the actual investigation part of this, the TBI, kind of outlined what they did with the money, which was, they bought construction materials. They did all kinds of electronics, and so forth, which were identical to the things that the feds found that Henderson had been involved in. So it's pretty easy to figure that, and they said that it's originated as a federal investigation. So, I mean, there are a couple of dots you've got to put together, but it's pretty obvious kind of how this all unfolded. But it's it was kind of a staggering thing. I mean, Jones is not the first sitting former sheriff to be indicted in Tennessee. And I remember the sheriff in my hometown was indicted right after I moved away to go to college. In fact, I found out about it by listening to the news on the radio when it was made national radio news. But
yeah, I remember one of our old colleagues at the News Sentinel back when I worked there 30 years ago, quoting some old line about how in Tennessee, sheriffs only leave office two ways: dead or in handcuffs. Because before there were term limits anywhere, it could be very hard to get a sheriff out of office. So those were kind of your options.
Yeah, and the sheriff from Roane County, where I grew up, who got indicted that year, was they were actually investigating stolen machinery, construction machinery, like bulldozers or whatever. And there had been a bust that the sheriff's office did months previously, where they had found a tractor trailer load of marijuana. So talking to the undercover agent who was dealing with the stolen farm equipment, and the sheriff kind of looked up and said, "Hey, by the way, you want to buy 2,000 pounds of marijuana?" And the undercover agent went, "Yeah, sure." And
Oops.
Yeah, he was. They made a big production of when they, after the bust, of taking the marijuana to an industrial park and burning it, but apparently they didn't burn 2,000 pounds of it.
Some of it.
I mean, it probably got burnt, just not at the,
yeah,
the same
right.
time.
Not all there. Well, so I mean, there's lots of things here. One is that as people who have been paying attention to the sheriff's office for a long time, as we have, will know, the drug fund has been a source of problems before, and I don't think this is unique to Knox County. It has to do with the way, like when we call these things the drug fund. I mean, this is money that is basically seized when they are doing drug operations. They bust people, they convict them, and sometimes they just seize cash, sometimes they seize property and sell it and whatever. But under the law, that money, the sheriff's office is allowed to keep that money and use it for narcotics enforcement. And so it can become rather easily a sort of slush fund. Even when it's used legally, there can be questions because there's not a lot of outside control over it. So there can be questions over how they're using it. One of the most famous instances here back in the 90s, Sheriff Tim Hutchison used drug money to build a whole new shooting range out in East Knox County somewhere. It didn't tell anybody he was doing this, and it only became an issue when neighbors suddenly started hearing all these gunshots all the time and went over to see what was going on. And he had used this money, had not gone through county purchasing, done any of that, just like hired somebody to like build this place for him. And it was a huge deal. And that was one of the things that became part of this sort of ongoing legal tussle between county commission and the sheriff's office at the time, trying to impose some sort of oversight on that money. But this just shows that whatever safeguards have been put in place over succeeding decades, that it's still a very big and not very well regulated and supervised pool of money, not least because they can get away with saying that they're using the money to do drug enforcement, to do undercover operations. We need to have this money on hand so that we can make buys and that kind of thing, which is true.
And they do,
there are legitimate uses of this, but that also creates, I mean, there's just very little visibility to that money. And that may be something for certainly for the next sheriff to look at, which is, as we know, is going to be Brent Gibson, because the unindicted Brent Gibson who won the primary. And it's also, maybe something that county commission or the next mayor wants to circle back around and say, do we need to put some more safeguards here? Because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, just kind of
cash
sitting there. Yeah.
The drug trade, it's a cash business.
Yeah.
So, and the sheriff's office can, once they seize this money, nobody looks over their shoulder about what they do with it. I presume that money has to stay somewhere as evidence for a case, but once the case is adjudicated, what you can pretty much do what you want with it, and little walking around money. And,
it's also interesting here because Jones was identified, I don't think by name, but with details specific enough that everybody knew it was him in the original indictment of Henderson. Yeah. And there was a lot of talk at the time. I think we probably talked about it here about, this is interesting that the former sheriff is very clearly, identified as, because it had to do with people building a dock. It was a
duck blind.
A duck blind. That's right. It
was a duck blind, and
Because that's where everybody goes to do their drug deals. That's why it's
duck blind.
We get together in the duck blind, we shoot some ducks, and we trade cocaine. What are you talking about?
And a lot of the purchases that Henderson was involved in, and Henderson, and you knew that this was going to go lots of different ways because Henderson got other sheriff's employees to do a lot of these purchases for him.
Yeah,
and a lot of them had to do with duck hunting or the blind or equipment and the materials for the duck blind. The plea agreement that he signed, which was the first document that we knew of that had anything to do with this, was did not refer to Jones by name, but said the former sheriff.
Right.
And he was the only sheriff that was doing it during this time frame.
Yeah.
I mean, so
it wasn't hard to, and so that felt like something that was sitting out there. This came up when Jones ran last time. It's like it's been that long that this has been sitting.
Well, this is the Henderson's plea was last year,
right?
And that's when it really.
But the investigation
started.
On.
Yes, yeah, it's been a couple of years. So.
And Jones just kind of always said, it doesn't affect me. It's nothing to worry about. Well, now it is obviously something for him to worry about. And the other thing that this gets at is just I have long said that the sheriff's office historically has been the most secretive, least transparent, least accountable part of county government. And there are multiple reasons for that. Some is that a lot of their work, their law enforcement work, is by law, by necessity, confidential. They don't talk about ongoing investigations and that kind of thing. But it's also just always been it's a super insular world, the sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. We talked about a little bit last week, all the sort of like different competing political factions and things that you can have within the department, which are kind of only visible from the outside around election times when you see who lines up behind different candidates. But it is not a very, the sheriff has a tremendous amount of leeway within the realm that he oversees, which is county law enforcement. There is he has no oversight. County commission does not oversee him. The county mayor does not. They approve the budget, but they don't have line item control over how any given sheriff uses the money. And also, in general, there tends to be a lot of deference to law enforcement. County commissioners, especially when they're running for office, county mayors too, tend to kind of, they want to be perceived as law and order candidates and say, we support, back the blue and all of that. And so that just creates this atmosphere, clearly, because we see it over and over and over again, of a certain amount of impunity and just not a lot of visibility for anything that goes on there, unless and until somebody gets indicted. Yeah. And then you find out what's been going on. Spangler, all the way through this, has kind of said, well, all of this relates to things that happened before 2018, which is when he took office, which is, appears to be true. Mm-hmm. However, several of the people busted here have had senior positions within Spangler's administration, including Amburn, who Spangler endorsed for sheriff, and Aaron Yarnell, who has been in a high-ranking role in Spangler's administration, and who Amburn had gone ahead and sort of preemptively named as his chief deputy while Amburn was running. He said, and if you elect me, I'm going to make Aaron Yarnell like my chief deputy.
Which was what Bernie Line, who was going to run for sheriff and probably would have been the favorite, passed away before the election, but he too was going to have Yarnell as his chief deputy, but Yarnell's been, he's up there, and these, there were other, high ranking people who were involved. Not all of them, but there were. I mean, there were. Pull it up here. There was, Yarnell's a captain. There was another captain, a lieutenant, sergeant, a former detective, a former sergeant, and a retired captain. And the brother of a former sheriff's office employee who himself was arrested, and convicted. So that was the one non-sheriff's office employee who was indicted with this crew. So he was he was in the sheriff's office orbit, if not working for the sheriff's office. So,
well, one thing it really does. We were talking the other week about how Gibson, because he was not backed by Spangler, he was not backed by Jones, and he has not been personally in the sheriff's office for some time now. He was already going to be coming in there with a bit of a free hand to kind of set things up the way he wanted and move people around and make changes as he sees fit, because he doesn't have sort of obvious institutional connections that are going to require him to, carry on any particular people. But this is making his job a lot easier, because some of those more senior people, they're all going to be, I mean, granted, they've just been charged, they have not yet been convicted. I'm guessing they probably are not going to have very big futures in the sheriff's office, regardless of the outcome of their cases.
Yeah, probably not. It's going to be years before this gets adjudicated anyway. I mean, it'll be a year or two, unless they plead guilty. And if they plead guilty,
well, part of what happens in these, when you indict this many people, like they've already got Henderson cooperating, right? And so there can be a real scramble, because presumably, like, all of these people probably have incriminating information about other people involved, and so there can be sort of a scramble for, like, who can make the plea deals the quickest to cooperate and kind of testify against other people. And so you could see some of that happen relatively quickly, but you're right, some of it could take a long time. Those who decide to fight it to the bitter end, if they're the ones who are still employed at the sheriff's office, will have it would take a long time. So but either way, I mean, if it takes a long time, you still aren't going to be able to serve. And if you go ahead and plead guilty, you're definitely not going
to be able to serve. Yeah. So it's, yes, careers are most likely ruined here, or ended. And then, that's as of last night. I did not check this morning before we started taping, but Henderson, Jones, and Amburn were the only ones who had yet to surrender. They are out of town, so by the time this comes out, I'm sure they'll probably be back and have been booked. So, but as you said, Jesse, they're all presumed innocent until their cases go through. So we'll keep track of that and all the changes that are going to be in the sheriff's office because of this.
Yeah. And, it ain't a good look for your Knox County Sheriff's Office, no matter how you slice it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that county commission and the only bit of oversight they have is the total in the budget for that gets passed. Well, County Mayor Glenn Jacobs presented his budget for the next fiscal year on Monday at Covenant Health Park. Now, this is his 8th and final budget that he's proposing. His 8th and final budget that does not require a tax increase.
he went 8 for 8. He hit for the cycle twice.
Yes, and one of the things is, and he kind of made a joke about it. He said, I say this, I've said this every year, and I don't get tired of saying it. There will not be a tax increase this year. That was paraphrasing what he said at the budget announcement. Now the budget is up about 2.8% over this year's budget. It's going to be, comes in at $1.15 billion. And a good chunk of that is the sheriff's office budget, but a bigger chunk is the schools, which is $717 million. The increase is about $31 million, and that mostly comes from property taxes and sales taxes. But a lot of it is kind of goes to the election and Jacob's replacement, who is going to have to live with this budget. I mean, that's the thing about it is Jacobs is proposing the budget now. Commission will approve it, probably unchanged. Later this spring, probably early summer, and July 1st, the budget takes effect, and Jacobs will leave office in early September. So the new mayor, whoever that is, will have a year, almost a year, of dealing with the county issues on the budget they did not have any say in shaping. So that will be kind of an interesting thing. There aren't any real big new initiatives because the county, in part because there haven't been any tax increase. There hasn't been a tax increase since '98. But there's not much there, and the debt, they're constrained because in the coming years their debt payments will balloon, and actually beginning next year they will be ballooning for about 4 years, and so with more money going to pay the debt, and tax revenues have slowed, especially sales taxes have slowed somewhat. There's not going to be a lot of extra money there for the next mayor to play with. And,
I mean, that, what'd you say, 2.6%?
2.8.
2.8%.
Less than inflation.
Right. I mean, the most recent numbers for inflation coming out of, I think it was based on April figures, is showing a 3.8% annualized inflation rate right now. And so, not only is there not going to be more money, there's going to be less money, which I think is reflected in the what level of raises are we seeing at the county under this budget?
They will end up being roughly 3%.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 steps and plus 1% is how it is. And they said it would be for most employees, it would be roughly 3%.
Right. So that is likely to, I mean, if they're lucky, that will keep pace with inflation, and it may well not.
Yeah, and those, that's just breaking even. That's not, and while the debt is taking more money out, it's got to come from somewhere. We don't know where that money's going to come from, but there's not a lot of money for major projects. So,
which is what, as all of the county mayor candidates were running through the spring, heading up to the primary, all of them, including Betsy Henderson, who won the Republican primary, who is adamantly against any tax increase, talked about the need to invest more in infrastructure in particular. But if you look at what's actually happening, how is the next mayor, whether that's Henderson or Bo Hawk, those are the only 2 options at this point. That's who's in the general election in August. But how is any mayor going to come in and present a budget a year from now that has a whole bunch of new money for new construction or infrastructure spending from the base that they're going to be starting at?
Yeah, and one thing I was talking to Chief Financial Officer Chris Caldwell about that. The one thing is the capital improvements plan, which is a 5-year plan, looks 5 years ahead, and doesn't include a whole lot in after this year that's designated for anything. And I was talking to him and said, well, if there's something that you guys want to build, what are you going to what can you do? There's some workarounds that they're looking at. For instance, the county bought the recycling center in the middle of Oakwood Lincoln Park, and that one where the big fire was a few years ago. And what they're talking about doing is building a facility there, and that would consolidate the activities in the Knox Central building, which is the old Sears on Central Street, and a school building over on Magnolia, and just combining those functions and putting them in this new building. And I asked him specifically about that project. I said, if you can't borrow the money to pay for it, what are you going to do? And they said, well, they're going to sell the Sears building. They're going to sell the other building, which is in the real close to the stadium, and and use that money to build this new facility, so they wouldn't have to borrow much, if any, to do that. So,
depending on how much they can sell those properties for.
True. Well, it's two properties for one building, so that's but I mean, there's that. I mean, one of the ways that the University of Tennessee is getting away with its construction spree is doing ground leases, where there is a third party that comes in and actually builds, owns, and manages the building while the land stays with the university. And there's always that option. If there's land somewhere the county has, they want to build something, they could do a ground lease, and of course there has to be revenue to do that, right? But the UT can do that in buildings that generate revenue, like it's proposed, like dorms, for example. Dorms generate revenue. They can do it with dorms. They're doing it with the entertainment center that is proposed for the south end of Neyland Stadium near Thompson Bowling Arena. So there might be some ways they can do that, but it's going to be tight.
Yeah, they're pretty constrained.
And Jacobs acknowledges that, but Jacobs, one thing is he is we say it every time we talk about him. He is an anti-tax guy. He made through 8 years without raising property taxes, benefited tremendously from the growth in population that the county has enjoyed.
But
that's a rough statement. Has enjoyed.
Well, but the growth in population is also exactly what's creating the demand that so many people are seeing and making for improved infrastructure. And as lots of people have done this math, including it was done during the Advanced Knox process. But we know that development in general does not necessarily pay for itself in terms of the services that it then requires, and especially the kind of development the county has been tending to do, which is your single family housing sprawl development out in the undeveloped areas of the county, which is the only kind of growth that Betsy Henderson says she supports, because she is opposed to more dense development, which actually produces higher property tax revenues. Like that money doesn't even pay for itself, much less give you some big new pot of money to be like, okay, now we're going to go and fix all the roads in West Knoxville. It just doesn't do that.
Yeah, the money that growth generates can be used as a mask for the underlying cracks, to cover up the underlying cracks what you're talking about. And one of the things that needs to be mentioned, we talked about growth and development, and Jacobs mentioned this in his address. As part of the Advanced Knox process, the last piece of that is the Unified Development Ordinance, which is kind of revising and consolidating all of the zoning regulations, the stormwater regulations, the subdivision regulations, all of those things into one document. They were working furiously to finish that up before Jacobs and several commissioners will be leaving office. And Jacobs said, that ain't going to happen. They at the beginning of the process, they had a contractor, and they had to, after a few months, they had to change contractors, put them kind of behind. They thought they would be able to get it done by August, which is when they would have to have the final vote on it from county commission. But that's not going to happen. Jacobs said, I talked to him after the speech, and he said that, he was hoping to, their goal now is to have some scenarios for what could happen, and then it will have to be picked up by the next iteration of county commission. But the interesting thing there is, the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, it kind of fleshes out the comprehensive plan that was developed as part of Advanced Knox. That calls for greater density, especially in the kind of crossroads areas in the unincorporated parts of the county, like Harbison's Crossroads, which is where Gibbs schools are, and the Carter area, and so it calls for more density in those areas, around those areas, kind of where you can cluster density so that the more rural areas stay less dense. That is the goal of that. It's all set up. Now, you're going to have, if Henderson wins, which Knox County is also not elected a Democrat as mayor, or he goes back to when that position was called county executive in 1998.
Right, we've never had a Democratic county mayor.
That's true. There has never been a Democratic county mayor. But that will make the first year very interesting, because not only that, there's some Republican candidates who are also anti-density, and there are Republicans on commission now who are going to stay on commission, who aren't ready.
Right. It's possible that the UDO arrives to a mayor and a commission who are both more skeptical of dense development than Jacobs has been. Yes,
absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there when this arrives. If Henderson and Republicans, the legislative candidates, win, Jacobs was kind of philosophical about it. He said, well, they could, they're going to do with it what they want to do with it. And they could have done that anyway, because they'll be in office and I won't be, but okay. But anyway, that's the budget. In the county, when, in the past, quarter century or so, whenever, a county mayor has said we're not going to raise taxes, county commission tends to say, great, we're approving it. So there probably won't be a whole lot of pushback on that, although there are commissioners who are concerned about the longer term financial health of the county, but I doubt there's going to be any kind of mutiny on that. Like I said, politicians, when for the most part, if a politician says we're not going to raise taxes, everybody else just says amen. So,
yeah.
Anyway, one thing that has that popped up at the end of the week, and Jesse, you covered this, the Knox County Schools has removed the book Roots from by Alex Haley from its library shelves. The Roots, for someone my age, I guess your age as well. We remember less the book and more the miniseries.
It was a phenomenon, and I feel like there is an age divide here because people who either weren't alive or weren't old enough to be aware of it when it was happening, I think probably don't quite appreciate this. But I looked it up. That miniseries you're talking about, the dramatization of Alex Haley's book. It was the most watched television program in American history to that point. Its last episode had between 130 and 140 million households tuned in at a time when there were 220 million households in the country. Yeah. So well over half, pushing up toward 60+% of every household in America was watching the final episode. It was just a watershed for and I think what people were drawn to was the drama, the story of this family, multiple generations of this family. But what it really did, and the book had already done this. I mean, the book was a bestseller before it was this massive miniseries. I think it really opened a lot of people's eyes, both Black Americans and white Americans, to thinking sort of comprehensively about what the Black experience of life in the Americas has been, because it starts in the pre-United States era. Yeah. But that whole experience, and it gave people this kind of through line to think about from slavery, then through the Civil War and segregation. And one thing that's interesting about it even becoming this sort of culture war issue now, where it's been banned, is it is actually, the story has a lot of horrors in it, a lot of atrocities. And this is why it got banned, because of some of the descriptions in the book of some of the abuse that was inflicted on enslaved people. But Haley was trying to wrote a fairly, I'm not going to say upbeat, but the story is a very up from bondage story. The core family at the center of it, at the end of the story, has sort of arrived. They are fully fledged property owning, voting citizens of the United States of America. Which reflects the time it was published, because it came out, right in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, which we're going to talk about in our next segment. So for all the kind of darkness in a lot of the story, it's ultimately a sort of redemptive American saga.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a story of persevere, a family's collective perseverance and ultimately a triumph when you look at that, as being captured in their home countries and shipped over here in deplorable conditions in ships, and in coming here and being treated like cattle or livestock. Which is kind of what the attitude was of plantation.
Well, it was the attitude of the Supreme Court too, up through the Dred Scott case.
In the then to be able to survive, persevere, and become, as you said, full-fledged property-owning, voting American citizen. That's actually a wonderful story.
And it's right. It's a story that it's the kind of story that we have relied on, not just with African Americans, but the whole immigrant sagas that we tell. And of course, a lot of those can be sort of rose-colored and candy-coated, because in fact American history is full of a lot of ugliness and struggle. But that has been a national narrative that we've kind of built our whole sense of American identity on, that in many ways people, through great struggles and injustices, have been able to persevere in the United States and make lives for themselves and their families. And that is the story of Roots. And so, I went and looked. I cannot find any place else in the United States that Roots has been banned. I'm going to do some more Googling this weekend, but it is possible that Knox County is the first place this book has actually been banned. And it is interesting the way it came about. And we talked last year and the year before about these new state laws that were passed. It was the Age Appropriate Materials Act that was initially passed in 2022, and then it was amended in 2024, and that's when it was really given teeth. That basically said that no book in any school library, grades K through 12, and it makes no distinction between what's appropriate for kindergartners and what's appropriate for 18-year-olds like my son who's about to graduate, can include either depictions of nudity, any depictions of nudity, there's no exceptions for this, or descriptions of sexual activity, sexual conduct, excessive violence, which is not defined, or sadomasochistic abuse. Those are the words that are in the law. And so after this law passed, school systems across the state have had to try to figure out whether the books in their library collections include any of these. So Knox County did an initial sweep and, kind of trained its librarians, and here's what you're looking for. Did an initial sweep, and at the end of 2024, they unveiled their first list of 48 books that had been removed, which included some classics like Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, The Bluest Eye by Nobel laureate Toni Morrison, and then various other books that just had. And one of the things with this law is that, I believe, in contradiction to existing federal obscenity standards, which say that for something to be declared obscene and removed from public view, it has to not have any redeeming literary or artistic significance. You have to take it in the context of the total work. The state law does not do that. It says that if any part of the work, it doesn't matter if it's a Pulitzer Prize-winning book like Roots, or an acknowledged international classic like Slaughterhouse-Five, if there's a paragraph in there, if there's a page in there that has any of these things, it's in violation. It needs to be removed. That's the way the law works. So they initially removed 48 books. Then last year, after a subsequent sweep, they removed another 65, and now they've added another 6 in this most recent pass. And these challenges can come from multiple directions. So school librarians are supposed to be doing sort of ongoing reviews of their own collections, looking for things that might, first as they get new books, but also as they have time or opportunity, looking through what's already on the shelves to see if there's any violations. But also any student, parent, or any other Knox County school staff member, not just a librarian, anybody can be a custodian, can raise a particular concern. And again, it's just a page, a paragraph, something that they think is in violation. Those then go to a district review committee. And interestingly, the school system is not maintaining any records of who makes these requests, who makes these filings, which that itself is a change in the law. There has always been a challenge process for challenging books in school libraries. That used to be public. You could know who it was in your community that was trying to remove a book. They're not keeping track of that right now, so we don't know whether this came from a librarian, a parent, a student, somebody working in the cafeteria. The one interesting thing that the school system did report was that this was the second time somebody had challenged Roots. So sometime in the last year or so, somebody flagged a particular passage in Roots and sent it to the review committee, and the review committee looked at it and said, no, this is in compliance with the law. We don't need to remove this book. So, and again, we don't have any way of knowing if these are two different people, but let's say it's possible at least that there is somebody out there in Knox County who was really focused on removing Roots from the school library And so having failed on their first attempt, they went back into the book and found some other passage and said, okay, well, this one, because I think there are some sex scenes of various kinds in Roots that I don't know if that's what was challenged the first time.
There's certainly a lot of violence.
Yeah, but this one, they said, okay, well, this definitely qualifies as sadomasochistic abuse. And yet, like, there are depictions, it's about slavery, you know, and it's like, how could you have a book of any kind that honestly depicted the realities of slavery in the Americas that did not have something that could qualify as sadistic abuse in it? Sadistic abuse was the engine that kept slavery running. The threat of sadistic abuse was what kept people, you know, working in the fields and not running away, because if they weren't working or if they tried to run away, they were viciously, brutally beaten and sometimes killed with no punishment whatsoever. That was legal.
Yeah.
And so how would you depict that in a way that wouldn't qualify as sadomasochistic abuse? So anyway, whoever it was, on the second go-round, the committee said, okay, well, yes, this does qualify as sadomasochistic abuse, and they removed the book. The timing of this is really interesting, coming right after we've had this whole redistricting of the state's only black majority district in Memphis, and other states across the South racing to, you know, chop up their black majority districts as well. You know, it is on one hand a coincidence that this banning of Roots arrives on the heels of that. On the other hand, it's not really a coincidence, because all of these are results of the actions of our state legislature. And so there are patterns there, let's say. What was interesting to me is that, you know, to, I guess, toot our own horn a bit, we were the first ones to actually report this. It had been kind of bubbling around on social media for a day, and I had contacted Carly Harrington at the school system on Wednesday about it, and she did confirm for me on Wednesday that yes, Roots was one of the books that had been removed, and I was waiting to get sort of the full updated list before writing about it, so we actually wrote about it in our newsletter on Friday. But as I was seeing this bubbling around on social media on Wednesday, I just went ahead and put a brief thing about it on because I saw people speculating, like, is this true? People had heard it, but there was no confirmation. And so I went ahead and put a short post about it up on our just our public Compass Facebook page, just a few paragraphs saying, you know, this is out there. I'm looking at that post right now. That post now has 10,400 reactions, 3,000 comments, and has been shared more than 4,000 times, which, you know, those aren't New York Times numbers, but I would tell you...
They're not Compass numbers either.
Like, our average post, like 10 interactions would be good. It would mean that, oh, somebody actually saw this because of the way the algorithm works and so on and so forth. Like, things often don't get seen. There's a lot of interest in this. Of course, every other media in town immediately picked it up. It's now been reported statewide. I will be surprised if this is not national news sometime in the near future, because the book is so well known, because the symbolism of a state in the South that just broke up its black majority voting district. One of its largest school systems is now also banning Alex Haley's book. Alex Haley, of course, has particular resonance in Tennessee. He spent part of his childhood in Henning, Tennessee, and then later in life, he actually lived here in East Tennessee. He bought a farm up in the Clinton-Norris area, and his papers are at the University of Tennessee. The city of Knoxville built a big statue of Alex Haley in the 1990s that is now the centerpiece of Alex Haley Heritage Square in Morningside Park in East Knoxville. It's a really nice statue. It's a very popular place. It's built, you know, he's sitting there reading a book, and the statue is big enough people can climb up on his lap, literally, and you'll go there sometimes and kids will be running around. They will be climbing up there. So, you know, this would have gotten attention regardless, but I think it sort of hits especially hard in Knoxville because we actually have this real connection with Haley. And I know, like right now, as we are speaking, the Knox County School Board is having a policy review meeting where I heard that there was going to be some further discussion of this materials policy. Probably people asking questions about, how is this decision made exactly? So we'll follow up on that and see what discussion comes out of that. But the reality is that the policy that the board adopted, really came from the state law. Now, you can say that there is some leeway, some discretion there because different school systems are applying this in different ways. I don't think Nashville or Memphis have banned any books at all under this state law. And I'm not sure about, Rutherford County has banned a whole bunch. A lot of other counties, it's been a relatively small number. So different people are kind of going about it differently. Interestingly, neither the law nor the policy has a mechanism for appeal or for returning the book once it has been pulled. So I guess we'll see, but it certainly has, this is, like I said, this has been going on now for a couple of years, this process of removing books from library shelves over time. But this has certainly shown a whole new spotlight on that, and maybe more people will pay attention to it than had been.
Yeah, when you mentioned Haley's connection in Knoxville. Kurt Vonnegut lived in Knoxville right before he went to. He was here. He was in the military.
That's right.
He was at UT doing some special military learning. Right before he went to fight in World War II, get captured and endure the firebombing of Dresden, which is the setting for Slaughterhouse Five.
Yeah, that's the core of that book.
Knoxville has these connections to writers who are not afraid to depict life the way it is sometimes, and of course Cormac McCarthy, who is undoubtedly the greatest novelist to come through Knoxville. Almost all of his books have sadomasochistic violence.
Ooh, I'll say. Yeah, it would be interesting to go back and look. When this law first passed, I did check the because of a prior state law that passed to force transparency on school libraries. You can go online and see what books schools have in their libraries. They are required by law to list that. And at the time this law passed, I went and looked, and some Knox County high schools did have some Cormac McCarthy books on their shelves. I haven't checked recently. None of them have been officially banned or removed because they're not on this list of. There's a total of 119 titles right now. But it would not be hard to find a passage in just about any Cormac McCarthy book that would violate one or many of the taboo things in the law.
Yeah, and I was thinking on that too. When I was a junior in high school, was assigned a book to do a book report on. But the teacher assigned it to us, and the one that was assigned to me was Light in August by William Faulkner. And in it, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on in it too. But particularly one of the most graphic things is when a kind of a neo-Nazi before Nazis, but he was a guy in Mississippi who a white guy who tracked down and killed a mixed race character who's one of the main characters of the book. It was all about fitting in. Where did he fit in? Did he fit in with the black community? Did he fit in with the white community? He didn't really feel at home in either one. Anyway, he was tracked down. Guy, the white character shoots him, gets out his razor, and castrates him. And it was a horrific thing when I read it. But that book changed my life. Mm-hmm. I would never have become a writer had it not been for that book.
Yeah,
and it was really. It's the type of book that would be banned, and I hope that nobody decides to go look in Knox County libraries to see if it's there and tries to ban it, because it was a really, despite its horrors, and in many ways, maybe because it was the thing that got me interested in reading and in literature, and because prior to that I was just kind of a goofball. So I'm still a goofball, but I'm a well-read one.
It's interesting. I was just talking about my son who's graduating. When he started school at L&N STEM Academy, his freshman year, he had to read a book over the summer coming in, and there was a list of books you could choose from. And we looked at the list together, and I recommended off of that list Slaughterhouse-Five to him, because I thought that, it has science fiction elements, it has some humor in it along with some horror. But I thought that he might enjoy that, and he did read it. I think he enjoyed it. I don't actually know, but it was just really interesting to me. It's like he literally read this book off a Knox County provided book list, and by the time he is graduating from high school, that book is now banned. I mean, this is the time we're living in, and I feel like sometimes some of this hasn't sunk into people, like what is actually going on right around us in our own community. And this law has, it's created this system where it really only takes one person. It does have to be a parent, a student, or a school staff member, but one person in Knox County can find one passage out of one book and get that book removed from a system that serves 60,000 students. And that's the legal situation that we have created.
Oh, yeah. It's you also talked about, you briefly mentioned all the stuff that's going on in Memphis. Let's talk about that a little bit. The redistricting fallout.
Yeah, it continued this week. Of course, last week we talked a lot about that special session in Nashville where they chopped up Memphis among three congressional districts. And there was a lot of hubbub during the session. There were protesters outside and inside the chambers as they were at the State House and Senate were going through all of that. And the Democratic legislators made many impassioned speeches, arguing against breaking up that district. And especially on the last day of the session, as it kind of rocketed toward its conclusion, the Democrats got louder and feistier, and both in the House and the Senate, there were members of the Democratic caucus who engaged in various forms of, what you might call civil disobedience. A bunch of the Democrats came down and stood in the well of the House as the vote was being called, and they locked arms, which you're not supposed to go stand in the well unless you've been called down to speak. This was the thing that Gloria Johnson, Justin Jones, and Justin Pearson, that there was a motion to expel them 3 years ago because they did this during a protest over a different issue, gun safety. And like they were feisty, let's say, in the state Senate. State Senator Charlene Oliver of Nashville, as the vote was being called, she literally stood on top of her desk and unfurled a sheet that she had written "No Jim Crow" on, and kind of stood there singing "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which people know as the Black National Anthem. So, yes, they made a bit of a ruckus. I think their argument would be like, if there was ever a time to make a ruckus, this was it from their point of view. But so this past week, House Speaker Cameron Sexton, in response and retaliation for what he perceived as assorted bad behaviors by the Democratic members of the House, sent a letter to Majority Leader Karen Camper, who is a representative from Memphis, and then to the individual Democrats in the House, telling them that they were being stripped of their membership on all standing committees and subcommittees because of their, blatant disregard for the rules and decorum of the House. And so, the practical impacts of this are not huge because, they're out of session right now. They will have some scheduled committee meetings through the rest of the year. This ban is for the current session of the House, which expires in November. The House will reconvene in January for a new session, and there will be new committee assignments at that point. Not clear if Sexton intends to carry forward any sort of retaliation. But it does mean that, from now until the end of the year, whenever one of those committees meets that one of those Democratic members of the House is assigned to, for example, Democrats Gloria Johnson and Sam McKenzie here in Knoxville, who represent 2 districts of people here in Knoxville. Johnson happens to be my representative. I think she's probably your representative too. We're not going to be represented on those committees.
Right.
And, there's a tendency at that level to kind of personalize this and make it be about the legislators, but the legislators are proxies. They are representatives. I mean, they're literally called representatives. That's their title. And they're there because they represent people, the voters of their districts, including people who didn't even vote for them but live in their districts. That's their representative. So we're not going to have representation on any of these committees as anything is discussed. Now, will that make a practical impact? Maybe not, since the Democrats don't have a lot of voting power anyway, but they have the ability on committees to at least raise issues and ask questions, call witnesses, all of those kinds of things. And assuming that this stands, which I believe the speaker is within his the speaker has a lot of authority in running the House. It's probably within his authority to do this. We just won't, I think I read an estimate that it was about 2 million Tennesseans are just going to be locked out of representation on those committees in the House for the rest of the year. Now, the Senate, which tends to be a little more even-keeled than the House, has not taken steps that drastic. Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally did say that he thought Oliver's behavior in particular was, I think the word he used was disgraceful. So I'm not sure if there will be further repercussions in the Senate. But as far as the House goes, now the House Democrats were all first they were outraged by this, but they were also unapologetic, saying that we did what we thought we needed to do to try to fight against what we perceived and still maintain is a great injustice to the people of Memphis. And so they didn't back down in any way, but they also, Gloria Johnson, for example, connected it to the redistricting vote and said, well, this is all about taking representation away from people. By breaking up Memphis, you're taking representation away from the black voters of Memphis. By doing this, you're taking representation away from all of the people who the Democrats represent there. And she sees that as an ongoing and troubling pattern in the House.
Yeah, well, I would not be surprised if there's continuing fallout. Of course, we've got lawsuits, that are
there have been lawsuits filed against the redistricting, multiple lawsuits by the NAACP, the ACLU. They're arguing that no matter what the Republicans in the House or in the House and Senate said, that this was a racial redistricting, and they have various arguments about that the black community of Memphis was treated differently than the white communities of Memphis in drawing these new districts, and that you can't say that this was just a partisan redistricting because the map sure looks like race factored in, whether they want to say so or not. I think under this new Supreme Court ruling that enabled all of this sudden redistricting of majority-minority districts, I guess we'll just have to see how lower courts are going to interpret that, but it may well be that lower courts are going to say, well, the Supreme Court said that they can do whatever they want. And so maybe that case ends up back at the Supreme Court, where they can either choose to clarify that, well, we didn't mean quite like this, or, yep, you're fine. I guess we'll see.
Well, one thing that the legislature did this year that has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with partisanship, was that they amended the 2007 Non-Smokers Protection Act. was kind of a quiet change that they made.
Yeah, I think this was actually I initially thought it was something they passed this year, but I think it was actually something they passed a couple of years ago and has taken time to take effect.
Nobody knew it.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, the 2007 law basically banned smoking in restaurants, bars, event venues, any public place essentially that was indoors. But there was an exception built into it that locals and the local governments couldn't do anything about it. But if you ran an establishment, a bar, for instance, and you only allowed people to enter the bar who were age 21 and older, you could allow smoking. Smoking would be permitted. Now, most restaurants and bars across the state and in Knox County, the vast majority of them went along and banned smoking because they wanted families to come in, with children to eat and things like that. So, the vast majority of establishments in Knox County and city of Knoxville are non-smoking, but there are between a dozen and 15 establishments that do allow smoking and do not allow anyone under the age of 21 to enter. City council decided. The drivers on this were council members Debbie Helsley and Lauren Ryder.
Former council member Lauren Ryder, but
I'm sorry,
still active.
Former council member Lauren Ryder. They were really decided, okay, we've got the authority to extend the ban to these establishments. We will, and so they introduced an ordinance to ban smoking in these establishments, like I said, it only affects 12, 15, and they're all locally owned ones. I mean, the big chains don't they don't allow smoking. So, anyway, the council last week had their meeting. They met. There a lot of people on both sides of this. The Smoke Free Knoxville, which is, as the name implies, advocates against smoking, and they were represented there by several people who spoke about the health, the health benefits of banning smoking, which just about undeniable. But and it was kind of couched in this framework that this is something that employees in some venues, musicians who come in and play, people who come in to deliver goods, or some of the they might deliver the beer, they might deliver the food, and others who would be in there for specific reasons. It would protect them from secondhand smoke, and so that was kind of how they framed it. However, there were bar owners and patrons who were there as well, who argued that, hey, wait a minute. Everybody knows these are 21 and older places. Everybody knows that these places allow smoking. If you don't want to go in there, don't go in there. And
and because it's such a small minority of all of the bars and restaurants in town, even if you work in the service industry, if you don't want to work at a smoking establishment, there are, in fact, you have many, many options of places to work that are not.
No, in fact, the one of the speakers from the public at the meeting pointed to Preservation Pub on Market Square, which allows the ground floor allows smoking. It's a 21 and up establishment, and it's owned by Scott and Bernadette West, next door to it, they have a non-smoking venue, Scruffy City Hall, and then they've got several other restaurants.
I think all of their other facilities
all of their others are smoke-free.
Non-smoking,
yeah. So if you worked at Preservation Pub as a bartender, say, and you, for whatever reason, you obviously took the job knowing that it allowed the bar allowed smoking, but for whatever reason decided you did not want to work in that environment anymore. Whether one scenario has been it's a female bartender who gets pregnant, or somebody who just maybe used to smoke and they decided to quit and just
doesn't want to be around.
Don't want to be around it. Fine, they can get a job at one of West's other bars and pretty easily, or any other. I mean, like I said, the vast majority of these places of restaurants and bars already ban smoking. So anyway, that was it made kind of an interesting thing, because that was one of the points that Councilwoman Amelia Parker made. She and Councilmember Matthew DeBartoleben were the only two voted against the ban. The council voted 7-2 to approve the ban on first reading. One of the things they did was they pushed back the effective date to January 1st. So if this passed at 2 weeks, we're going to have a second reading of the ordinance, assuming it passes. I've never seen an ordinance that passed 7-2 or better, or with 7 votes or higher on city council. Never seen an ordinance that passed first reading with that kind of margin that didn't pass second reading. So,
but I think they're gonna hear a lot between
now and then,
and at that meeting, because I mean there were people who showed up to speak against this last week, but this has also blown up on social media. I've seen all sorts of people talking about it, including a lot of people who aren't smokers, but who say, people should be able to. I mean, one argument I've seen people make is that, well, smoking is legal, and if it's legal, then there ought to be places that you can do it. It's weird to have something that's legal that you're not allowed to do anywhere. Also, there are exemptions to it. There's the cigar bar exemption, because there's a cigar bar right down in the old city, and somehow cigars are exempt from this. I'm not familiar with what the studies are on secondhand smoke from cigarettes versus cigars, or what that reasoning was, but so even within this ban, there are still going to be some inequities. But anyway, it seems to have gotten a lot of people's attention. It may also be that there's a lot going on in the world. A lot of people are riled up about a lot of things, and to a lot of people, this maybe just kind of feels like, why do we have to do this right now? There's a lot going on. Is this the most important thing for government at any level to be focused on?
Yeah, I mean the bar owners got at least one of them got a couple thousand signatures together just in a couple of days on a petition they delivered to city council. And yes, there is movement afoot to have kind of an organized approach there. So
they're going to come have a smoke in the main assembly room.
They got a lot up in there. You bring in a bottle and a pack of smokes, and but anyway, so that will happen. Well, a little more than a week from now that you're listening to this. The next time that council meets. That's all we're going to be able to talk about this week. We, like I said at the outset, barely scratching the surface of what happened last week. It was just crazy. Now next week or this week, it might be a little calmer. We do have. There's not a whole lot on this the civic calendar, but county commission is meeting at 5 p.m. on Monday in the main assembly room of the city county building. We're going to have Commissioner Andy Fox's resolution on restrictions and actually banning of large data centers in the county. That's going to be on there. It'll be a resolution to send or to request the Planning Commission draft a change to the zoning ordinance for commissioners to consider. That's kind of the process you have to go through to change the zoning ordinance. It needs to go through the Planning Commission first, so that's what they're going to be voting on Monday. Also, Damon Rawls, who represents East Knoxville, and more than East Knoxville, but the first district wants to put some restrictions on corporate entities who can buy property, and so that's going to be on the agenda as well. One thing that won't be, and we feel we need to say this because there are a lot of people who are going to be who want to speak out on this, and that is Commissioner Fox's, Andy Fox's planned presentation, discussion, screed. I don't know what it's going to end up being on how Islam is not compatible with Western society. He had planned to do that last month, was planning to do it this month. He is going to postpone it again, so he will not be giving that. So if you're wanting to go down to either show support for Commissioner Fox and his stance on Muslims, or you are dead set against it, if that's the only reason you're going to the meeting, don't bother, because it's not going to happen. Now, you should go to the meetings anyway to see your government in action, but if that's the sole reason to go, you're going to be disappointed.
And you don't have to go to the meetings. You can turn them on Knox Community Media and watch them right there.
Absolutely. That's a great resource too, by the way, when you can't be at a meeting. In fact, sometimes, I'm not able to get to a meeting, and I have relied on them to report it. Another thing that they're good for with us is double checking your quotes.
Yeah, because the videos are there. You can go back and watch them.
Go back and look at the video and make sure you quote, because sometimes as try as we might, there might be have two words flipped, or we thought we heard one word when it was actually another word that they said. So it's always good to if we've got time, I like to double check my quotes against those against their videos. Anyway, that is it for this week, and we will, obviously there's going to be more that happens next week than just that county commission meeting. So,
although it is one of these weeks where we're going to be, once you get past Monday, really everybody's going to be thinking about the upcoming Memorial Day weekend, and so it's one of these weeks where.
School ends in the middle of next week too,
school ends,
so everybody that wants to skip town as soon as school's out,
it's a wind down week for sure.
Yeah. But whatever does happen, we'll be on top of it. So and we'll bring it to you.
If another dozen county officials get indicted for something, we'll definitely be here to talk about it.
All right, yeah, we'll have that. We'll be here to talk about it, and we'll also have the reports on CompassKnox.com. And we also have our daily newsletter that subscribers get, and where there's even more news there. So that's it for this week's episode. Jesse, great to have you. Join in as always.
Always happy.
Yeah, Seth, thanks for your stellar work.
Nothing triggered me today, so I didn't have to jump in a bunch and yell at you guys.
Hey, real quick, how was Hallaroo?
It was great. I am 20 and a half miles on my feet that day. That's my stat of the day. We had a great turnout. It was a fun, exhausting day. I'm still not done putting all the pieces back together, but that's what we do when you do a big event. So
awesome. Good job.
Fantastic. And one more person to thank is Will Wright, who provides our music for us. And that is it for this week's installment. We'll be back next week to talk more about Knoxville and Knox County government, politics, and business on Compass Points.
CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.